major thoroughfare in Brooklyn in front of a McDonald's, smoking a blunt with a friend when a big plain van pulled up. Both of the boys were searched, handcuffed, put in the van, taken to the local precinct, fingerprinted, and then they were taken to central booking and put into a holding cell with 30 other people, all of them adult males. He was kept there till 5 the following morning. Then he went upstairs. Then his name was called. He went to another holding cell. There were still, maybe 30 or 40 people in the holding cell, virtually all of them adults. And a young man was sleeping on the floor under a bench, and he was wearing silver jewelry. And Aaron overheard some of his cellmates talking about jumping this guy and stealing his jewelry. And there was an attempt to rob this kid, and there was some punches back and forth. The victim of the assault yelled for the guards to come. The guards never came, and Aaron is sitting there in his corner of the cell, quote, scared shitless. Now, it's pretty unusual for a teenage male, to admit to fear. So I think he must have really been very scared. All in all, he was kept for 18. He was in custody for 18 hours. He was finally released. Now, of course, it could be worse. Obviously, most juveniles that are being arrested these days, and I've handed out a chart that many of you, I hope, have, so you can see that, in fact, these anecdotes are very suggestive of a trend, which does seem, in fact, to be happening, which is a very, very dramatic increase in the rate of juvenile marijuana arrests, and these are virtually all for possession. It's true that most of these kids, as with our friend here on the dais, don't spend a whole lot of time in custody, and they are usually given adjournments in contemplation of dismissal. But as a parent, and as a parent with strong civil libertarian sensibilities, the thought that any of my children or any of the kids that I know, would have to spend time in this manner, that is, under the physical control of the police, being searched without cause in some cases, being put into very unsanitary, according to Aaron, there were roaches and rats and mice, and even allowing for a certain amount of exaggeration. Being put into a place that's not safe for children to be in. These, and the simple fact of the loss of liberty make me very, very frightened for my own kids. And I guess that's the point I wanted to make to all of you today from a parent's perspective. I already alluded to the statistics. In 1994, the juvenile arrest rate for marijuana possession reached the all-time peak year of 1980. About 65,000 of these arrests nationwide. And I think that there are a number of reasons for this increase that I just want to lay out to you for you to think about. First of all, lots of teenagers use marijuana. As you probably know, the annual survey just came out yesterday or the day before from the University of Michigan. And past month use had doubled between 92 and 95, from 3.4% to 8.2%. And now it's kind of reached, it seems to have plateaued, but there are still a lot of kids using marijuana. 22% of 8th graders report using it in the last year, 41% of 10th graders, and 50% of 12th graders. Parenthetically, when my kids went in that direction rather than alcohol, I was very, very, very relieved. But it does put kids obviously at risk with the government. The other thing to remember is that young users are at much greater risk than adults for arrest because, for the simple reason that they can't smoke dope at home because they don't want to be detected by their parents. And so in their calculation of risks, it's safer to smoke outside the home, and that's what they do. And interestingly enough, in New York State, while possession of small amounts of marijuana is a violation that will get you a desk appearance ticket, if you're smoking in public, it can be a misdemeanor. And that is what is enabling the cops, I think, to make these kinds of arrests all over New York. So arrest is always a possibility. And I think that for us as parents, that raises a very, very important issue, which, from a harm reduction point of view, we ought to insist that our kids who choose to smoke pot do so at home and not on the street and not in the parks. And we maybe even, this is another issue that all of us have to confront is, then what about your friends? And I'm not going to say what, I'm not going to say what anybody should do. It's complicated. But, if like me, you think that it's a lot worse, to end up in jail, it's something to think about. The third reason there's been this increase in marijuana arrests is, of course, at least in New York, and I think in other places as well, it's part of this, broken windows approach to law enforcement. Am I getting close to the end here, Marcia? Okay, which is, the quality of life thing. That's Giuliani keeps harping on. We have to make arrests for these minor infractions, and, somehow this magically brings the crime rate down for more serious crimes. This is certainly what he's saying. It seems to be what he believes. But I'm not sure that people really realize that this is now being applied to children as young as 13 and 14 years old. I would certainly love to see a reporter, do a story about that. And I think that finally, this issue of juvenile marijuana arrests raises questions that I think need to be confronted by all advocates, the ACLU, NORML, and other marijuana advocacy groups, because while it's perfectly appropriate for us to say that we are pushing for decriminalization for adult use, and that is my own position, we also have to be ready, willing, and able to defend the civil liberties of our children when it comes to this. And the kinds of things that are happening are unlawful searches, detention in adult facilities. I don't know. I'm now that I've sort of done a little work on this, I want to go back to New York and find out whether the detention of kids in these police precincts, chained to chairs and sometimes in holding pens with adults, perhaps violates certain policies and possibly even laws that bears further scrutiny on our part. I think that I don't have much evidence of this, but we know that racial disparities occur at every point in the criminal justice system, and so we have to expect that if these two white kids that I know have been treated in thus and such a way, that their black counterparts are probably being treated worse. And in fact, I do know of one case, very recent case, of a 16-year-old African-American young man who was detained overnight, and he was not only handcuffed, but he was shackled for the entire period of time. And it's just one story, but again, I think it compels us to look into this further. There's also the issue of entrapment. My son, who I'm happy to say has not had this experience, has told me that he has been approached on numerous occasions in Park Slope, Brooklyn, where we live, by young adults who he doesn't know, who come up to him and say, "Hey man, you know where I can get some weed?" And he has the good sense, I like to take some credit for that, and to say, "No, I don't know." But there are actually efforts to entrap children. I think that's really disgusting. There's also the issue of forced treatment. In the case of Mike, because his marijuana smoking came to the attention of the authorities, who then called his father, his parents did freak out, and he spent 8 months in a rehabilitation program, which he it was a horrible experience for him. I think I'll just end there. I had a little more, but I don't need to. I'm preaching to the converted. I don't really need to convince you anymore, except to say that one of the things that you will hear when you talk about juvenile marijuana arrests is that people will say, "Well, these kids have to be taught a lesson," right? Okay, so what is the lesson we want to teach our kids is the theme of this panel, and I think we're probably pretty much in agreement that isn't the lesson that we want to teach our children. Thanks a lot.
My name's Chuck Blake. Yeah, I'll try to introduce myself actually. I've been a kind of guerrilla activist for the last 20 years, and but for the last 3 years, I've